VeriForce is proud to announce the latest version of our Safeland USA accredited course called Basic Orientation 7.0. This is our flagship course that has been taken by over 1.6 million students nationwide. The newest version of this course is shorter than the last version, with condensed training and updated multimedia, but it still includes the same topics as previous courses. As always, the Safeland orientation remains with this employee through the career. It eliminates the redundancy of multiple orientations, and it stores all the training records in a single centralized database for everyone to use. Also, we offer two solutions for getting the training. You can either seek out Safeland training from one of our third-party providers, or you can send one of your instructors through our Train the Trainer program to teach your own employees. If you're interested in learning more, please contact our training sales department at 888-482-9101. That's 888-482-9101. Or you can email us at trainingsales@veriforce.com.
Hello, everybody, and welcome again to another episode of the Risk Matrix. And we are James Junkin.
Roll Tide. It's good to be here. Thanksgiving. My body's built for Thanksgiving. And man, I just love everybody. I'm thankful for 2024, but I'm ready for 2024 football season to be over so we can move on to better seasons. Roll Tide.
Roll Tide. Roll Tide. And myself, Dr. Martin, as his sidekick. And today we have Simon Goncharenko on. We've had him on before, but he's got some important stuff to talk about today that I think y'all will really like. Before we get started, let's talk a little bit about the fact that we're powered by VeriForce, but we're sponsored specifically by the VeriForce Worker Pass. VeriForce Worker Pass is a comprehensive worker level compliance management solution. Using advanced technology and with seamless integration, VeriForce Worker Pass gives companies the power to establish worker identity and qualifications, as well as monitoring compliance status with a level of precision and efficiency never experienced in the industry. The importance of compliance at the worker level cannot be overstated. At the heart of Worker Pass is a refined approach to compliance management that accommodates the needs of a diverse supply chain. To learn more about how VeriForce Worker Pass can help you achieve supply chain and contractor compliance, reduce risks, and ensure workers go home safe from high hazard jobs, visit veriforce.com/solutions/worksite-management. That's veriforce.com/solutions/worksite-management. And take it away, James.
Man, I'm a big proponent of VeriForce Worker Pass. It's taking safety to the worker level, gives a lot of visibility, confirmation of training, confirmation of qualifications, really that flow of work stuff. So I'm a huge fan of VeriForce Worker Pass and VeriForce in general. I want to thank them for powering our podcast and allowing us to come on and do what we do every week. And guess what? We have a key member of the VeriForce team with us today, Dr. Martin, Dr. Simon Goncharenko. Longtime friend. He is the director of client implementation as part of the expert services division there at VeriForce. But before he was at VeriForce, he had another life, and that was in the data center community. So I'm really interested to hear Dr. Simon's story. And for the first time on the Risk Matrix podcast, we're going to have a presentation that goes along with the discussion. So take it away, Dr. Simon. You're in the Matrix, baby.
You're in the Matrix,
all right,
baby.
Thank you, both of you. Really appreciate it. Enjoyed our times before and looking forward to the opportunity to talk to you this time. And it's actually, I think, really interesting because that little presentation that you read, Dr. Martin, about the Worker Pass, VeriForce Worker Pass, I think provides a really kind of a cool segue into what I want to talk about today, because if there's one thing that data centers are, is that they're super security conscious. I remember the first time I got a job in data center space, and one of the very first facilities I ever visited down in Houston area, I remember having to drive all the way back home because I made a rookie error of forgetting my driver's license at home. And without a driver's license or a passport, you are not allowed to get on site. So they're super
no.
concerned with security, right? And some of the data centers that I've actually visited, due to the nature of the data that is being stored in those facilities, you actually had to be a US citizen and present a valid US passport to be admitted to the site. And so how cool would it be if, you know, a solution like a Veriforce Worker Pass could be utilized, where instead of just scanning their badge, you know, they scan the Worker Pass, and the security guard can not only see that this person, in fact, is cleared to come on board, but the security guard can also see on the screen that this person actively participated in a successful JSA completion that day. You know, they did their pre-job worker risk assessment. Their training is up to snuff. You know, they've been in the industry for 10 years and with the present employer for, you know, that many years. And in the past 10 days, this guy has worked this many hours. So, you know, you're also getting information on potential fatigue factors and so on and so forth. Anyway, I know I'm going down the rabbit trail a little bit, but wouldn't that be cool?
That would be super cool. Super cool.
Cool.
Moving beyond just verifying, hey, James Junkin is James Junkin, but also, you know, James Junkin's qualified to do this job, or in most cases, since I'm a safety professional, not qualified to actually do any work. Talk about work.
Well, and that James Junkin's got his head in the game. You know, he did not put in 250 hours of work in the last week. And so, you know, his eyes may be open, but he's dreaming of Roll Tide right now, you know? We want to make sure that he's focused.
You betcha. You betcha.
50, but I put in a good 90 this week, so I am ready for some Roll Tide. But anyway, data centers, and just starting out here, Dr. Simon, how they use 1.4% of the world's electric capacity. That's amazing.
Isn't that insane?
That's amazing.
Wow, that is insane.
I mean, all of the electric capacity in the world. And it's interesting because, you know, as we get into this presentation, we're going to talk about AI, obviously, which is one of the huge drivers of data centers. And as we're talking about that, you know, this AI race that some of the top technology giants, we're talking about Google, Microsoft, you know, Meta, Amazon, Apple, you know, as they're kind of entering and heating up this AI race, you know, they're starting to kind of look into the future almost, and they're starting to design and envision and dream up these like super gigantic capacity type facilities, for which, you know, the current technology as far as like getting electricity to it doesn't even fully exist. And so they're having to go, I mean, the dreams that they have cannot be powered by the current utilities, and it'll take like 25 years to build the proper utility feeds to come into those facilities. So they're having to think outside the box. I mean, they're thinking of, you know, they're thinking of pipelines coming, gas pipelines straight to their facility to fuel, right, to bring that power. They're thinking of placing their facilities near places like 3 Mile Island, and all of us know, you know, the well-known safety disaster that took place there. They're thinking of kind of restarting some of that in order to fuel that insanely, you know, insatiable appetite for power. So very, very interesting stuff. Let's jump in. All right. So just to kind of first, before we jump into the data centers, I want to just talk about the world data, right, and what kind of fuels this whole data center exponential growth. I mean, currently we have 402 quintillion bytes of data that is created every day. I mean, that's a like unbelievable number that just blows your mind. That's 402 with 18 zeros after that. Another way of putting that is exabytes. That's another term. But I mean, that's stuff that's just hard to even like fully picture what that means.
Every day.
Every single day. 90% of all the data in the world today was created in the last 2 years. And if just to kind of get an idea of the amount of data by 2020, so that was 4 years ago, there was 40 times more bytes of data than there are stars in the observable universe. And there are 200 billion trillion stars in the observable universe. So, I mean, this is the kind of mind-boggling stuff that helps you to understand the need for data centers. You know, by 2025, the average person is going to interact with the connected devices nearly 4,800 times a day. 75% of the population of the world will be connected, creating and interacting with data. And over 25% of data created will be real time in nature. I mean, you know, you can kind of appreciate that when you think about the fact that, you know, our cars, our refrigerators are talking to the internet. I mean, think about your Tesla, right? And when it enters that self-driving mode, think about all the millions of calculations that have to be taken place at some brick and mortar facility somewhere in order to empower your safe driving on the road.
You know, even I don't have a Tesla, but I do have a 6.7 liter twin turbo Power Stroke Ford F-250 Super Duty King Ranch Edition FX4 off-road package that's black, named Frank. I
Roll
love
Tide.
And it's got Roll Tide on the back. It does. But every now and again, I'm riding down the road and it'll pop up on the screen that it is transmitting the data analytics from my vehicle to, I assume, Ford, to be put into their diagnostic programs and their analytic programs. So technology's everywhere. You know, when you think about what you put right there, the average person will interact with a connected device nearly 4,800 times a day. And, you know, I don't know if you see my old screen right here, but I was surprised at how many times, you know, my phone will tell me how many times I've looked at my phone and accessed my phone a day. And it's astonishing. You know,
I'm afraid to look at that. I'm afraid to look at that figure with
hundreds
myself.
of times a day, I'm fooling with this phone.
Yep. You know, it's
I remember the days, guys, when I used to go to a site and I would have to leave the site and find a payphone 25 minutes away, right? And now I'm at my fingertips. I'm accessing this stuff at the speed of light. So, I mean, anyways, I'm old.
No,
insane
song. Here's a quarter. Call someone who cares. People nowadays like, what's that got to do with anything?
Well, I'm telling you,
have to do with calling?
Yeah, I know, right? Pretty crazy stuff. So let's go to the next slide.
All right.
This is in 2020, so that's 4 years ago. Every minute of the day, that's kind of a cool graphic. Facebook users uploaded 147,000 photos. WhatsApp, which is like a popular texting app around the globe, users share 41 million messages every minute, right? Instagram users post 347,000 stories. Microsoft Teams connect 52,000 users. I mean, it's just insane. LinkedIn users apply for 69,000, so 70,000 jobs are being applied for every minute on LinkedIn. So this is the kind of stuff, you know, just to kind of give you an idea of what's the backbone of this, right? 1.7 megabyte of data was created every second by every person during 2020. 95 million photos and videos are shared every day on Instagram. 306.4 billion emails are sent, and 5 million tweets are made. This is every, you know, we're talking about every day. And 463 exabytes. That's that number again. That's 463 with 18 zeros of data will be generated each day by humans as of next year. So this is the kind of stuff that's like the backbone of what the data centers are used for. And as this slide says, really our lives rely on the functioning and availability of data centers, and it's not an overstatement. If you think about it, from telecommunications to power and energy to manufacturing to transportation and traffic systems, retail, you know, James, how much money Amazon makes off of you, public health, banking, and internet. I mean, you know, just all of that is powered by a data center. You know, you can have a surgeon doing a emergency surgery in some hospital, and in the middle of that, he or she needs to reach for that X-ray or for that, data point that they need to access during the surgery, and that information is stored in some data center somewhere. That's how critical this is. You can have pilots trying to land that airplane, and their screens and the data for their approach and everything else is powered within some brick and mortar data center somewhere. That's kind of how insane that is. They're truly the brains of the internet. And it's weird that all of that, developed from something like this. This is back in the 80s, what an old NASA Jet Propulsion Lab data center looked like, today you can have these hundreds of racks, with insanely colored cooling infrastructures, to these floors that literally you can eat from. That's how clean they are. They're called white spaces or clean environments. And these are the environments where the temperature, the humidity, and the air quality is measured and controlled very carefully, because just of the sensitivity of the servers and so on. So pretty crazy as to the types of data centers that are out there today. You have co-location, and this is basically where a provider will go out and build a data center, and they will lease the space inside that data center to anyone that wants to put from a few servers to some people lease the entire data center for their space. But that's a co-location. They literally erect these, floor to ceiling fences, basically, in order to protect, as a physical security, protect their servers, which was an interesting thing. This reminded me of a number of times that I had an interesting conversation about fire extinguisher access, because what a lot of these facilities do, right, they complete the building, they bring the fire marshal in, the fire marshal comes into this data floor, data space, and Hugh looks, and there's zero fencing or anything like that. And he looks at this huge room, and there's a fire extinguisher within 75 feet of any spot in the room, and everything's cool. He approves the room. The moment he leaves and they start selling the space in the data hall, all of a sudden, all these barricades are erected everywhere. And so now all of a sudden, you go from having a fire extinguisher within 75 feet to you having to go from one cage to another and go 500 feet before you can get to closest fire extinguisher. And so that was kind of a conversation that we've had lots of times. Every time I'd audit one of these, I'd say, guys, you need to start thinking about what happens between the time that the fire marshal left and your current situation today.
I imagine, bringing it back to safety here just for a second, since you brought up fire extinguishers, I imagine that some of these servers don't respond very well to dry chem being sprayed on them.
Oh, and that's a very good point, actually. The fire extinguishers there obviously are just for the same reason that they are positioned anywhere else, really, in most of our workplaces, just for safe evacuation of our personnel, really. It's not for, extinguishing any significant fires. Because of the sensitivity and the nature of these places, they actually have incredibly robust VESDA systems, smoke detection systems, and so on and so forth. So, no, you're absolutely right about that. And then they're hyperscale, and so these are your Googles and Metas and Microsofts and Amazons of the world. They build these humongous multi-million square foot facilities. When you have your stuff stored in the cloud, that cloud is still supported by a brick and mortar facility somewhere. And usually they're grouped geographically and so on and so forth. And then you have enterprise facilities, and these are typically your banks. By law, they're precluded from storing our personal information within a leased facility. So they can't put your personal information within a co-location facility. So they have to erect their own and run their own data centers where your information and information of their customers is secure. And then the edge data centers is something that has kind of started really taken off in the last, I would say, 5 years. And I haven't seen it truly explode insanely, but it's basically just a smaller, if you will, a miniature spot that is located much closer to the end user, but it's a very much more limited application, and that's kind of that's another type there. What your typical data center looks like, you have the concrete and steel construction that's built to protect servers in the event of natural disasters. You got data halls, as I mentioned, they're called white space, and so it houses clusters of interconnected servers in this climate controlled room. And of course, servers are essentially a computer without a monitor or a keyboard. So they store and process data and connect to a network for input and output. Then you got UPS units, which are an uninterruptible power supply. They're basically a string of batteries that is a little larger than a car battery, but they're all connected together and they're constantly charging. And what happens with that is you have a data feed coming in from the utility, and that's the dedicated utility feeds. A lot of times there are two independent feeds. And in case of a loss of power, you have the switching mechanism within the data center will switch the power from the utility to the backup generators. Your UPS units function to continue carrying the load while the switching takes place from the utility to the generator. So typically a data center will have enough of batteries, enough of these UPS units to maintain power for 15 continuous minutes, but they don't really need it because the switching from a utility feed to a generator usually takes seconds. And so, but that's kind of how that works. And then you have, obviously cooling is extremely important because you can imagine how hot these servers get just from that constant load that's on them. And then you have the network operation center that's usually powered by a few people kind of 24/7. The interesting thing about these facilities is that, you know, it takes a huge number of people to build one of these. I mean, we're talking anywhere from 800-900 to 2,000 plus personnel that's involved. Mostly of them, probably 30 to 40% of that workforce is comprised, unsurprisingly, of electricians. They're the ones that have one of the major roles to play here. But when it comes to running these facilities, interestingly enough, it really doesn't take a huge crew to run an existing data center. Probably about 100 people or so. They cover a lot of square foot space, but it doesn't take very many people.
Simon,
some of the components. Yeah, go ahead.
Just for a second, if we go back to that slide, and if you're traveling, please don't look at this. You watch it when you get home, right? We are safety professionals. But when I look at this slide, when I think of data centers, man, I'm thinking of some server room. I haven't really thought about it. But really what you're talking about is a huge facility that has to be constructed with the ground up and with a lot of individual hazards that you typically find on a construction site when you're building warehousing or some type of building construction right there, and coupled with a lot of high voltage. A lot of high voltage. So,
well, let's not forget the fuel for those generators too, right? I mean, you're inserting a lot of different things in this facility, beyond just protecting the servers, but protecting the facility and the power interruption and all that other kind of stuff. So
no,
what struck me was the fuel supply. I mean, I wonder, what does that look like?
Both of you are absolutely right. From the construction of a facility introduces a lot of the same risks that any normal construction site will have entail in it, from work at heights to excavations to just a lot of those same electric hazards and so on and so forth. And then the environmental stuff, you're absolutely right. The environmental from placing these generators, fuel tanks, to containment for them, to even going into the operational side of things. It goes into all kinds of environmental considerations that have to be made, because if you think about these generators, they have to be powered up, for them to be operational every month or every so often. They have a kind of a schedule for, and so that brings up, like you said, Dr. Martin, that brings up the consideration of how much pollution you're putting into the air and what kind of permissions you have. And as you well know, these vary greatly. some of the areas that are perfect areas from the standpoint of weather, from the standpoint of, availability of land, availability of fiber, cheap electricity, good personnel. But some of those areas, and I'm thinking specifically of like Maricopa County, for example, have really restrictive environmental regulations. And so that kind of puts a really, have to be really creative when you're a data center operator. That data centers love Phoenix area, from all the other criteria that I mentioned before. It's a great area, but man, when it comes to the environmental considerations, you're absolutely right. There's some things that have to be thought through.
I mean, when you think about this, just looking at this picture, I don't want to hold you up, Dr. Simon, but when I look at this picture, all of a sudden, all these hazards are starting to pop out, and in my brain is just firing and thinking about, when we have construction, you had to have a crane out here to get this going. You had to have trenching and excavation. Somebody had to build the parking lot. We got people that probably had to work at height. Of course, we got electricians. So you're seeing all of the hazards associated with building a facility in a major construction site. And so the facility owner has the same issues related to health and safety and contractor management as the same as people that are going out and building, distribution centers or whatever, but coupled with a little bit more high risk, as far as
Absolutely.
the size and voltage and things that are coming in here. So I just wanted to pause on that just for a second and sort of make that observation, because if you think about, oh, I'm the safety professional in a data center. Well, bro, that may be the lowest risk environment ever if you just think of it like that. But when you think about building this and maintaining it, there are all these hidden hazards and things that are unique to this type of operation, where people can get hurt and the environment can get damaged and the asset can be compromised. And like you said, if we compromise this asset and the data center goes down that houses the particular data that I need for my operation I'm having on the other side of the country, that would be bad.
Absolutely. And, it's funny because back in the old oil and gas days, we were talking about the tremendous cost of, when a well goes down and the production interrupts, and what that costs us in a minute or an hour, or per day. And we're talking about millions per day. Well, this is kind of that to a much greater degree today, because from business interruption costs, I mean, you think about a Google data center going down, and that impacts so many businesses that are relying, because they're storing their data in the cloud, right? And so you have all of that business impact, and we have millions and millions of dollars just kind of exponentially increases there. And so you're absolutely right. It's a big deal. And in addition to all the other hazards that you had mentioned, they're also just super high electric hazard there, because most of the data centers have a utility substation somewhere either on their premises or close by. So you have 13.2 kV coming into the facility and having to be stepped down to 480 volt. You know what I mean? So you have all of those considerations as well that are there. So couple of some interesting things. Most of these facilities are designed to the TIA 942 requirements for electrical and mechanical. A lot of them have power. Actually, they have raised floors, so they have all the power and cooling and everything takes place under this raised floor. So it's a 36-inch usually space there that and then now you have confined space that you're probably thinking of as well, that you have to get into. Most are carrier neutral facilities versus carrier specific. So your internet provider, you can choose which one you want if you're storing your facility, your data somewhere. Obviously, all of them are striving for 100% uptime service. We talked about large or hyperscale data centers. They can go anywhere from 100,000 square feet to several million square feet. And they accommodate tens of thousands of servers and consume. The data center is measured by the megawatt of power. So that's how much power is consumed by everything that works there. And UPS rooms, we talked about that, various critical power infrastructure designs, lots of electrical equipment that just kind of steps both from a redundancy perspective, as well as, stepping the electricity down. Cooling infrastructure is super important. You can have water or air cooled facilities, and DXs, which is the direct expansion type of air conditioning, computer room air handlers, computer room air conditioning units, just a lot of different. You have emergency backup power. In the old days, I remember some of the earlier meta facilities. One of the earlier ones that I went to in Fort Worth. I showed up to this facility, and it's about 6 different buildings on it, sitting on about 150 acres or so. And they erected, initially when they built it quite a few years back, they put up 30 2.5 megawatt generators on this facility. Wow. In case, the power goes down, to be able to carry the weight. In fact, a few years back, when we experienced that snowpocalypse here in Texas in February, when we had teen-degree weather, the city of Fort Worth was actually starting negotiations with that data center over there to help them power the city, because there was no, power available, and they had the capacity to do that. Nowadays, they don't build that many generators because they have enough facilities to where they can distribute the load between the facilities. So one facility doesn't have to carry all of their data load and so on. So that's kind of an interesting consideration. And then you have, I won't really go into this slide, just to say this, data centers are obsessed with redundancies. And so they have different tiers on the base of how much redundancy they offer. And, from tier 1, that is a basic capacity and has a UPS, to a tier 2, which just has redundant capacity. Tier 3 can be concurrently maintainable. And tier 4 is totally fault tolerant, allowing any production capacity to be insulated from any type of failure. Interestingly enough, back to the world of safety, even though redundancy is such a big deal here in these capacities, a lot of them still find themselves being very hesitant to rely on that redundancy. They absolutely hate taking something offline, and utilizing, that's not to say that they don't use lockout tagout, but they're very nervous, even though they're designed for redundancy, but they're always nervous about what happens if the redundancy fails and if it doesn't work. And so I know that in my time in the industry, we've had several conversations, and I've had to do a good amount of research to actually look into the OSHA's infeasibility exemption and its application to the data center operations. So that was kind of an interesting aside there.
That's a highly hazardous situation, right? You're talking about working on live systems.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
That's crazy.
And again, I'm not saying that a lot or many of them advocate for that, but I am saying that those conversations have had to take place in different situations.
I can see where they'd want the option, right? I mean, and I think maybe that's the discussion that they probably were having. I'm guessing is, we're not saying we will do it. We're saying, what if we have to do it? I mean, have to in quotations, right? So
yeah, and that's where we had
that.
to kind of and that's where we had to kind of go and explore. Okay, does OSHA infeasibility exemption apply to business continuity versus true emergency situations that are outlined there? And business continuity, I don't think was quite what the exemption had in mind.
Yeah, probably not. I mean, back when this was written, people weren't even envisioning these types of systems. But, when I'm looking at this, I'm thinking, boy, your NFPA 70E coordinator's got a long day when we go in here to do this maintenance. And when we're doing the maintenance, are we doing the maintenance, or we're bringing in a high voltage electrical contractor that's going to come in and do this maintenance for us? And if they are, what kind of quality of that contractor do we have? What's the qualifications of that contractor? Mm-hmm. What's the programs of that contractor? Because I just completed a lot of assessments out there on high voltage electrical contractors. Some of them got really good, outstanding safety programs and a lot of protections and protocols and procedures in place. But it doesn't take that one to have an incident. And when you're dealing
Absolutely.
with what we're talking about right here, not only does that incident affect that person, that incident might affect everyone on this planet.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, you're absolutely right. I mean, and you can, even what you just said, James, just doing even a deeper dive into that. Okay, so if you are bringing a qualified electrical contractor, are you going to audit their lotto program? And, and are you just going to sign off in their lotto program? You're going to take their word for it. Are you going to make them sign your lotto pro? I mean,
Are you qualified to look at their lotto program? I mean,
yeah.
my goodness. I mean, I would love to be able to audit contractors on certain things, but here we're looking at something that's an animal all of itself, right? You have to
Mm-hmm.
have a contractor to audit a contractor
I
almost,
Yep.
bet
right? Because
the lockout tagout coordinator for these data centers, I bet has the same frustrations as the lockout tagout coordinator in the PSM facility. You know, uh,
Absolutely.
so there's a lot of planning that has to go in place here. I mean, I was just astounded at all the hazards, because when you think about this, you're not familiar with it. It goes in the cloud as if the cloud is in the air somewhere, when really the cloud is in some brick and mortar building sitting someplace that's assembled by human beings,
Mm-hmm.
manned by human beings, powered by a lot of electricity, and tremendous amount of hazards. So this is very, very eye-opening.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, shameless plug here, this is where I actually learned all the things that went into my Save Lives, Pushing Boundaries and Human Factors book. This is where I cut my teeth on a lot of these very much, um, realistic, very raw type scenarios and situations that actually kind of contributed to a lot of the content there. So
Yeah,
very
thank you
interesting.
for the shout out for me and Dr. Martin in the podcast in your book, man. I really enjoy your book. If you've not gotten the book, check out Dr. Simon Goncharenko's book, Save Lives. It's really thought provoking
right
and a
on.
practical guide for users on how to save lives within your organization.
Thank you for that. I one last slide, James, if you guys don't mind me sharing, just a couple of other interesting thoughts there. As you can probably imagine, data centers are very expensive to build and maintain, but return on investment is fairly quick. It happens to be one of the most popular forms of investment today. A lot of the corporations and funds like to invest in that. As you can imagine, geography is very important. You have to have to put a data center somewhere, you have to consider the right weather, you have to consider electric availability, fiber availability, you have to consider price of land, obviously, access to human resources so you can be able to put one of them. And where it gets really interesting is, as you can imagine, let's just consider the top 5 technology giants for a second. What one of them finds as a good location, because of all these factors, the others are probably having the same type of research facilities that are finding the same exact numbers. And so all of a sudden you have, the situation like recently, I worked in the Austin, Texas area, and literally, James, within 70-mile radius of Austin, Texas, you had Samsung building 70, actually, I guess it was like a $25 billion semiconductor facility. You had you had Meta building about a $2 billion facility. You had Tesla doing a $1.5 billion expansion. You had Raytheon doing a $6 billion. And so all of these projects within, 70-mile square radius, they're drawing from the same general market. So the competition for the workers was absolutely insane. And that happens in a lot of these geographies because a lot of these guys are competing with one another.
And, I kind of liken it a little bit to the automotive business, where you have a manufacturer, but you also got suppliers that operate hundreds of millions of dollars worth of business, sometimes billions of dollars worth of businesses that are centered around there in support of this. Mm-hmm. So when you're building and constructing and you've got all the energy giants together, they're pulling from the same pool of people for employees. but they're also pulling for the same pool of people for contract.
Yep.
So it just makes
Absolutely.
sense for those folks to work together on safety, like we've done in construction, in oil and gas. We have neutral ground where we come and we share things. So I think that's kind of an emerging concept, probably in the data and technology space of recognizing safety in the construction, maintenance, and operation stages, and sharing those best practices, et cetera. Because, you know, like I said, I'd never really considered the hazards associated with working or building or maintaining or constructing, you know, a data center. But
Mhm.
now that you're breaking it down for us, you know, some safety professionals got a full-time job. You know, when you told me you worked for Meta, I'm like, is that dude looking out for paper
Does he do
cuts,
anything?
you know, the electrical cords on the
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
carpet, you know, somebody's got a heater stuck under their desk. But really, man, you had a very complex, full-time, stressful, dynamic job.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of moving parts, that's for sure. And you know, a lot of consideration. And it was kind of, at least the way that Meta did it, you know, it was technically the safety program of a GC. So you find yourself in a very quintessential, typical safety person's dilemma where you have all the responsibility and zero accountability. You know, no one is accountable to you. You just have to drive it by influence. And that's kind of what the name of the game was.
Absolutely.
Um, but just closing out this slide, I found some of this interesting research stuff on the internet. There's a global worldwide power shortage that is really inhibiting the data center market growth. Vacancy rates, as far as data centers, are continuing to go down. The large corporations today are having a really hard time securing data center capacity because of the low supply, construction delays, and power challenges. Last thing that I wanted to mention here, and we'll kind of close with my presentation, and that is this, and I kind of started with that, the AI race, right? It's according to Michael Dell, who is, of course, the founder of Dell Computers. What he's saying is that if the current rate of the global AI race stays at the same pace that it is today, we're going to need 100 times the capacity for data centers in the next 10 years. So that kind of gives you an idea of the kind of growth that is still present within this industry and what to expect here.
Well,
So your expertise is always going to be needed there, Dr. Simon.
It's very, very likely, very likely.
Well, everybody's just tuning into AI, and I imagine the power that's necessary to run the data centers that powers the AI is only going to grow based on, you know, what you said about Dale and his opinion there. So where is the power coming from?
And that's, you know, that's kind of what I started out from it. They are getting very, very creative. And some of this, they're kind of almost designing, you know, as they go. And they're obviously utilizing everything that they possibly can, solar, wind, utility, which utilities are not keeping up with the demand. So what they're doing is they're now placing these facilities near some of the decommissioned nuclear power facilities, and they're trying to bring them back online in order to get the electricity. They're actually directing, you know, pipelines with gas pipelines directly, you know, to these facilities. And so they're getting very, very creative and thinking outside the box, because the only
Are they going to
way
get into the utility industry? There's a question, right? Are we going to have meta power plants, right?
Well, and I mean, that's, you know, it's interesting because in the past, what has happened actually is just to keep up the pace of their construction, Meta is actually known to have constructed a utility substation and then turn it over to the utility providers because they were able to do it a lot faster, a lot more efficiently, and then turn it over to them to run so that they can
some
get
of that oil and gas too, where some of the
necessity builds invention, right?
Yep. You know, they build their own substation and basically their own electrical infrastructure and say, plug us in, coach.
Yep.
That way we can get to work. Well, all this is super interesting, and it sounds like it's only going to expand as we go forward, and it's going to be a quick expansion because the need is going to be
Yeah.
generated. So, a lot of opportunities for jobs, a lot of opportunities for construction, a lot of opportunities for safety professionals looking for employment. It sounds like in these data centers. So, if you think you're going to go to a data center and chill, man, and worry about paper cuts,
Get it.
forget it. You're about to be the safety professional for a general contractor, it sounds like. So
Yeah,
Yep.
absolutely. And there are a lot of opportunities also for places like Verforce, because as the workforce is getting thinner and thinner, there's a greater need to qualify these contractors. Because like we've seen with Horizon, BP Horizon in the Gulf, you may not have any of your own personnel, but your contractors will bring you down with them. Raising, what do they say? Rising tide raises all ships. And so, but the same can happen with the opposite side of it, where, and that's why just kind of managing that risk.
One well-placed torpedo can sink all ships.
Exactly. Yep.
big flood, we all drown.
Yep. Yeah.
Well, Dr. Simon, thank you for this. You know what? I like this version of the risk matrix, James, bringing somebody on with a new take on things. I didn't know half of what you told us about data centers. I'm thrilled to have learned something today, and to know about your expertise in this area. Should I ever need to call on someone, especially now that you're at Verforce and leading the charge. So thank you so much for today, Dr. Simon.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yep. Thank you, Dr. Simon, for coming. As always, you're a great guest, wealth of knowledge. I appreciate our friendship over many years, and thank you for what you do at the Verforce team to help bring workers home safe for a high hazard job. Thank you also to our listeners, right? Thank you. If you're just joining the podcast, we appreciate you. For those of you who've been with us for over a year now, we especially appreciate you. Go on over if you're new to this and go to the Verforce page and like the podcast, hit subscribe, smash that subscribe button, smash it like you smash that Thanksgiving turkey, smash it and get notified when it's time for a new episode. New episodes drop every Tuesday around noon Central. And you can also access our historic catalog of over 60, coming very close to 70 previous episodes with guests like Dr. Simon, who's been on before, members of our Strategic Advisory Board, industry experts, and of course, me and Dr. Martin. We're also available on Spotify. So check us out. There's opportunities to learn, to share together. Hey, you want to be on the Risk Matrix, baby? We'd love to have you. Shoot us some messages on LinkedIn, or you can find us in the comment section. There's always a place to reach out to us. Our email address is probably out there on our LinkedIn pages. They're well known. You can reach out to Verforce. They'll get the information to us. So, hey, if you want to be on, we want to hear what you got to say. But until next time, y'all keep bringing those workers home safe from high hazard jobs, and roll tide. It's almost basketball season. Out.